Coming up on UGTV. Coming up on UGTV. Board of Commission meeting of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas.
Lord, I pray, God, that you will shower us, God, with your Holy Spirit. God, that you would lead us and guide us in this meeting, God, on this evening as citizens of this great city of Kansas City, Kansas, Lord, that we would come together to make our city the best it can be. Be with our leaders and all who are gathered here on this evening. And in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Reverend Smart. I'd ask the clerk if there are any revisions to tonight's agenda.
I'll note we do have a clerical error on the agenda. Master Plan Amendment number MP 2019-5 regarding property at 3301 Garfield Avenue appears twice on the P&Z non-consent agenda. The item will be heard as item A1 only and not C1.
Okay, well, that's why I'm confusing. Okay. Thank you. So tonight we have two distinct parts to our meeting. The planning and zoning portion will be handled first, followed by the regular commission meeting. I'll ask the clerk to read the statement required by state law governing the planning and zoning portion of our meeting, followed by the items on the planning and zoning consent agenda.
We would like to welcome all present to this meeting of the Unified Government Commission. Members of the commission are Mayor David Alvey, Commissioner Melissa Bynum, at-large District 1, Commissioner Tom Burrows, at-large District 2, Commissioner Gail Townsend, District 1, which you've heard, she's on the phone this evening, Commissioner Brian McKiernan, District 2, who was unable to be with us this evening, Commissioner Ann Murguia, District 3, Commissioner Harold Johnson, Jr., District 4, Commissioner Mike Kane, District 5, Commissioner Angela Markley, District 6, Commissioner Jim Walters, District 7, who is also unable to be with us this evening, and Commissioner Jane Filbert, District 8, who is also unable to be here. As each petition is called this evening, all persons for or against will be given the opportunity to express their views. If this is the first time that a particular petition has been before this commission, the commission has three options. One, it can approve the recommendation of the Planning Commission with 6 votes. Two, it can override the Planning Commission's recommendation, but it would take 8 votes to override. Or three, it can return the matter to the Planning Commission for further consideration, together with a statement specifying the reasons for the referral back to the Planning Commission. The consent agenda is the first part of the Planning and Zoning agenda. Items on the consent agenda have received a unanimous vote of recommendation by the Planning Commission. Unless there is a request to set aside an item from the consent agenda by the applicant, a member of the public, the Unified Government Commission, or staff, then the Planning Commission's recommendation on all of the items on the consent agenda will be adopted by the Unified Government Commission at one time. I will read the list of agenda items on the consent agenda, and when I have completed the list, the mayor will ask if there are any requests to set aside items from the consent agenda. This is your time to stand up and request that an item be set aside if you do not agree with the Planning Commission's recommendation. If an item is set aside, the matter will be discussed and voted upon separately. All items not set aside will be approved with the Planning Commission's recommendation. We appreciate the attendance of those people here this evening, and we recognize the importance of each petition. We would remind you that there are a number of items on the agenda, and we would appreciate your efforts to make your remarks as concise as possible. We ask that anyone with a cell phone to please turn them off or switch to non-audio. Once the petitioners make their presentation, anyone for or against will be allowed the maximum 3 minutes to state your views. As you come to the microphone, please state your name and city for the record. The mayor and commission are required to disclose contact with proponents or opponents on any item on the planning and zoning agenda. I will ask if any member of the commission wish to disclose any contact with proponents or opponents on any item on the agenda.
Mayor,
Commissioner Townsend.
yes, I wish to disclose I have had contact with an opponent of item MP 2019-5 and the related matter B1 number 3201.
Thank you. Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you, Mayor. I have had contact with proponents of SP 2019-91.
Thank you. Commissioner Bynum.
I've had contact with proponents of, on the non-consent agenda, item A1, MP 2019-5, and its related item B1, number 3201.
Thank you. That's all.
I will now read the items on the planning and zoning consent agenda. Under change of zone applications, item 1, 3199, Charles Mastag, change of zone from R1 Single Family District to AG Agriculture District for an accessory building at 7615 Swartz Road. Recommended for approval. Item 2, change of zone 3200, Michael D. Foster with Foster and Associates. Change of zone from C1 Limited Business District to C3 Commercial District to allow apartments over commercial space at 3101 Strong Avenue. Recommended for approval to CP3 Planned Commercial District. Under special use permit applications, item 1, SP 2019-83, Darrell Evers, renewal of a special use permit for a liquor store at 2862 West 47th Avenue. Recommended for approval for 15 years. Item 2, SP 2019-86, Andrew Morgan's, renewal of a home occupation special use permit for an Airbnb at 616 Elizabeth Avenue. Recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 3, Christy Eaton and Kim Maples with Little Leaders of KCK, Inc. Special use permit for a child care facility on the KCK CC campus at 7250 State Avenue. Recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 4, SP 2019-91, Laura L. Sanchez with Homestead Montessori Farm School, home occupation special use permit to operate a private Montessori school for a maximum of 12 students, ages 6 to 15, at 3800 Weaver Court. Recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 5, SP 2019-92, Joe Hedrick with Cactus Bed Properties, LLC, renewal of a special use permit for a short-term rental Airbnb at 3841 Lloyd Street. Recommended for approval for 2 years. Item 6, SP 2019-93, Cheryl Sopick with Share Bears Dog Grooming, home occupation special use permit for a dog grooming business at 401 South 82nd Street. Recommended for approval for 1 year. Item 7, SP 2019-94, Will Anderson with BHC Roads for Frank Perry, renewal of a special use permit for the temporary use of land for a security office trailer at 8130 Caw Drive. Recommended for approval for 2 years. Under plan review application, item 1, PR 2019-16, David Kuntag with DLR Group, preliminary and final plan review for an athletic complex for Turner USD 202 at 2211 South 55th Street. Recommended for approval. Under miscellaneous ordinances, item 1, an ordinance rezoning property at 8525 Parallel Parkway from C1 Limited Business District to CP3 Planned Commercial District. Recommended for approval. Item 2, an ordinance rezoning property at 2718 North 119th Street from AG Agriculture County District to AG Agriculture City District. Recommended for approval. Those are all the items on the planning and zoning consent agenda.
Thank you. Does any member of the commission or anyone in attendance tonight wish to set aside any item on the planning and zoning consent agenda? If an item is not set aside, all items on the planning and zoning consent agenda will be voted on by one vote to follow the recommendation of the planning commission. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
Murguia,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kane, Markley.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. That takes us to the planning and zoning non-consent agenda. So items A1 and B1 will be heard together, consisting of Master Plan Amendment MP 2019-5 for a change from public, semi-public to urban residential, and change of zone number 3201, changing the zoning from R1B, single-family district, to RP2B, two-family district, for a residential duplex subdivision at 3301 Garfield Avenue, both requested by Michael Osborne with Call Valley Engineering. The Planning Commission voted 7-0 to approve the change of zone. However, the vote was 6-1 to approve the master plan amendment. We'll note that a protest petition was filed against the change of zone. However, it did not meet the requirements, therefore it has been deemed invalid. And received communication today about that. But I'd like to now turn it over to staff. Staff, you'd like to make some opening remarks?
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. First remark we'd like to make is that to remind everyone, this conversation cannot involve at all the income status of potential residents or the age status of potential residents. To begin with, staff did receive a protest petition. We received that on last Friday. We were able to look that over and review it by Monday and give the results back to the protest petitioner. We did inform them that the petition was invalid. we had recommended a recommendation of approval to the Planning Commission, and they had also recommended a unanimous approval for the change of zone and 6-1 vote on the master plan amendment.
So at this time, I'd ask the applicant to come forward to present his applications. Please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mayor, fellow commissioners. Michael Osborne, Call Valley Engineering, 14700 West 114th Terrace, Lenexa, Kansas, representing the development team consisting of the Central States Conference of the Seventh-day Adventists, Mr. Bill Canton, and Mr. Dave Osborne, no relation, different operation than myself. As I said, I'm with Call Valley Engineering. We've provided the engineering services and initial planning associated with the project, which is located at the southeast corner of 36th and Garfield. Currently, that's a vacant parcel of land. The portion that we're dealing with is approximately 4.5 acres. We're proposing to put 24 dwelling units on the project. That would consist of 12 duplex is on what would be the current public street of 36th Street, 6 units on that side, and then we will construct a new public street at what would be approximately 35th Street to the south of Garfield, terminating in a cul-de-sac within our property, so it's not continuing on. I know that at one point in staff's review, they considered would it be beneficial to tie on to Richardson to the south of us, and I think through further conversations and a look at that, it was felt that the cul-de-sac maintained the best layout for the development itself. 18 of our dwelling units will be on the new proposed public street. I think you have seen, I don't know if there's pictures in your package, I believe, of the duplexes themselves. They're fairly nice, new construction elements, and it will meet all of the public works design guidelines associated with the Unified Government of Kansas City, Kansas, and with that, our setbacks, so on and so forth. We would develop the plat that would have 12 duplex lots on it. All infrastructure would be constructed as part of the development. We would construct new water lines, sewer lines, public street, storm facilities, and we have developed a preliminary storm drainage report showing that we can comply with the storm drainage ordinances of the Unified Government in addition to the best management practices for cleanliness of stormwater. With that, that's generally the gist of it. One of the elements that did get brought up significantly at the Planning Commission dealt with the maintenance of the development itself, and one of the requirements was to submit information regarding the management company that would be managing the development as a whole, and that is Universal Management. I believe we did submit that information to your planning staff with resumes of the individuals that are associated with the organization and other projects that they've been a part of. Pretty simple development. The one thing I would like to point out is obviously we're R1B at this time. We're asking for R2B. The density we're proposing is significantly less than we could actually build under R1B. And with that, one may question, well, why go through the effort of attempting to rezone the property to allow the construction of duplexes? And with that, this is slated for 55-plus community. Now, with that, the primary resident is required to be 55 or older. They can have other members that are less, but most of the developments of this nature that we've been a part of and the development team has been a part of show that you have a 95% of your residents meet that age restriction, even though the state laws do allow others to live there. But many folks in that age bracket, and I'm one of them, but that tend to gravitate towards this housing, like to have attached dwellings. Many of these we've put together in a more townhome development, many are in a duplex development. All are single-story slab-on-grade structures, and our typical resident would prefer to live in an attached home. And that's why we're here before you tonight, bringing forward the duplex request as opposed to just staying with single family. And as we've shown, our density is much less than we could build in the current R1 status. So with that, we feel that this would be a good fit for the neighborhood, and I'm here to stand for any questions that you may have regarding this project.
Okay, I see none. Have a seat. And
Thank you.
I'll ask is there anyone present who would like to speak in favor of Master Plan Amendment MP 2019-5 or change of zone application 3201? All right. Seeing none, is there anyone present in opposition who would like to speak? If so, now is your time to come to the podium and state your comments. And we do remind that there are 3 minutes. We ask you to state your name and city of residency.
Yes, my name is Michaela Turner, 3313 Richmond Avenue. I'll try to be as brief as I can. Yes, I was the one who spearheaded the petition. I also want to put it on the record that when I called about the requirements for the petition, I was not given the pertinent information about the requirements for it, but that's neither here or there on that one. There was a lot of talk going around in the last meeting about this, our opposition in our neighborhood on this project being a fear of change. It isn't. This is not our first go-around with the Central States Conference when it comes to their property and building things. This was apparently a 9-year project in the making. No one in our neighborhoods knew anything about it until one of our neighbors informed us. It seems to me, looking at the last notes of the meeting, that they were ready to break ground on this. They're wanting to break ground on this in late fall without having everything together. This, we do not feel, is going to be a good fit for our neighborhood. There was also talk about people being reached out on this project, particularly on North 36th Street. I've personally spoken to everybody on that neighborhood. No one knew anything about it. The neighborhood association president, Mrs. Donnie Thomas, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight because of a family matter, was brought up in the last meeting stating as being behind this project as well. I spoke with her earlier today. She was, one, not happy that her name was brought up in this, and two, did not support it either. I just feel like there is a lot of deception going on with this, because it's yet again another example of you're saying this is for the community,
Ma'am, you
but
have 1 minute remaining.
okay, you're saying that this is for the community, but you're not doing a good job at reaching out on it. So for those reasons, I do not would like to see this here.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak in opposition? Please come forward, state your name and city of residency.
Excuse me. Yeah. My name is Nina Turner, and I live at 3313 Richmond Avenue. And my concern is, at the last meeting, they failed to say that in 15 years, 7D Business will completely own that property. And my understanding is that, okay, that's a church. So if the church completely owns it after 15 years, I'm like, as far as I know, churches is like exempt from taxes and everything, you know. Okay, so where does that leave Wyandotte County? You know, so if they, in 15 years, the church will completely own that property that they're doing now. That means that they're going to be exempt up on the church, you know, guidelines, you know. Okay, so if they're not paying taxes, where does the taxes come from, okay, to cover that? And I'm looking at the residents surrounding that area. Our taxes most likely would go up and property value will go down, because that is the reason why everyone moved in around there, for the quietness and and nothing in front of us, and the traffic is, unless you live up in there, you hardly get traffic coming up and down that area, and that's what drawed a lot of people there, you know. And so I'm like, we was told that unless you are the owner of that property, the person that is renting to own, most of them is renting to own, or they just renting there, they're actually living there. That's why they moved there. They don't count. We have to go to the owner, even if the owner live out of town. But
You have 1 minute remaining.
he said it was, you know, on record that he visited everyone up there. So and they was all for it. So if it don't count for us, it don't count for him neither. You know, the president of the Seventh-day Adventists. So those was my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, man. Anyone else who'd like to speak in opposition? I'm sorry, ma'am, you have to come to the podium and you have to state your name and your city of residency.
I'm sorry, my name is Andrea Hicks, and our residency is at the 3422 North 39th Street. We were a little confused about this last situation that just happened. We thought that we would have this opportunity to come here to state why we don't want this particular Montessori farm school.
That's a different.
So it's a different one,
Yes,
I know. So that's what I was saying. What are we cannot do anything about that at this time because we didn't know how you guys go about getting your votes. It was like, what's set aside? What's this? What's that? We thought we'd have this type of opportunity to be able to discuss what needed to be done, and then next thing you know, it's approved, and they get up and walk, and it's like, wait, that's a problem right now.
Well, and it is the process we have voted, and it was, if you wanted to take something off the consent agenda, you needed to ask at that time to bring that off the consent.
And I guess it was a misunderstanding because we didn't know where at in that process do we do that. And then it was like votes, yeah, I, and it's like, what happened?
I understand.
So, we got questions. We need to, we got problems right now.
Well, at this point, I would recommend, since it has been approved, that you would need to reach out to the developer again to see talk to them about what they intend to do at that site on the Montessori school.
Yeah, this is not good.
Commissioner Bynum?
Thank you, Mayor. I have seen this scenario play itself out more than one time with folks who didn't understand the process. And I would just ask us, especially on planning and zoning agendas, to do all that we can to be clear with our public about the process. As clear as we can possibly be. This is not the first time I've seen this. And I would ask planning staff to please talk with these folks and try to identify what is the issue they have so that perhaps we can be an advocate for problem solving on that issue. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Okay, if there's anyone who'd like to speak in opposition to this particular item, please come forward. And seeing none, I would ask the applicant to come up and to address some of the concerns that were raised.
I think the most significant concern that keeps being brought to the table is the apparent lack of communication. And while I can't speak for the duration of this project, I can speak for the portion of it of which I've been a part of, which started about March to April of this year. The project itself has been brought to the state of Kansas, my understanding, several times in the past, looking to attain the financing and funding through the state that it has recently acquired. When that process is going through, many of you know that's preliminary, it's in its early infancy stages. Typically, one does not go forth and discuss the project with the neighbors because at that time, in general, it's not even a real project yet, it's just a concept. We did follow all of the protocol of the unified government in public notifications, in attending and hosting as part of their neighborhood meeting, a presentation at their neighborhood meeting. We sent out all of the proper notices to all of the neighbors at that time. At that point is when we did get some resistance during the neighborhood meeting. I think that's outlined within the notes of the neighborhood meeting. And with that, the major pushback was you're throwing this on us now. You're not involving us. You're not going down this road with us. We didn't know about this. I guess while it was presented that this had been a thought for quite a long time, as most of you know on the development side, till you have your financing set up, the project typically is not something that's moving forward in a positive direction. So it was notified once that was put in place. Usually, and I deal with many of these types of projects in many communities, when we have the neighborhood meeting, my goal is to bring forth from the neighbors, what do you like or not like, or how can we augment the layout that we've chosen, the arrangement of the development itself. At the end of the neighborhood meeting, I did get up and ask that very specific question. I said, I appreciate that the half a dozen families here that are not necessarily in favor of this project going in their neighborhood. My concern as the design engineer is to address any technical issues, layout issues, or things of that nature that might make this development more amenable to your neighborhood if it were to be put in. What suggestions do you have that you would like to see us adjust? And the response I got was zero. I did actually pull a gentleman aside and said, I'm not sure where you live, but what in this development could we do? And he says, make sure you don't connect that street. Okay. Again, one of the things that we have gone through with staff on that. I don't have a lot I can say to, we don't want it in our neighborhood. And I guess I'm not going to say I'm confused. I deal with this on a regular basis, as I said, with many municipalities. But at the end of the day, there's very little I can say to that other than in this instance, while we're asking for rezoning, and I've emphasized this earlier, the number of housing units that we're requesting to be placed on this parcel of land is significantly less dense than can be placed on the property as it exists today with the current zoning. And so we're always happy as development teams to listen to the neighborhood and do what we can to make adjustments to our development to fit in with whatever the neighborhood may desire. We've not received any of that to date. All we've received is, we don't want this. And so I don't have much I can significantly address to that other than confirm again that we've complied with all guidelines, we've met all mailings, we've met all notifications, we've held all meetings, and we followed all the protocols that are put in place by the unified government, inclusive of all of our design elements. And so with that, that's about as much as I can outline on that. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions you all may have regarding the project.
That concludes the public hearing. I'd ask if there are any comments or questions from the commission.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Commissioner Townsend.
Yes, thank you. I do have a couple of questions for the developers/owners. And just so I'm clear, I understand that there will not be, as part of this project, any tie-up or tie-in to Richmond Street. Is that correct? I visited that area, and that's a dead end. So that would be quite problematic if more traffic, vehicular traffic, was poured into Richmond. So my understanding from the schematic and from the plans that I read is that there will not be a street tie-in to Richmond. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Does this layout include lighting?
Yes.
That the developer will put in? Street lights will be included?
Yes. We will construct the street in full accordance with the guidelines and recommendations and requirements of the unified government, and I do believe that does include street lights for this length of street.
Okay. It was being mentioned of the fact that this proposed development is not as dense as it could be. Is there any plan to come back later and add more units to this area?
That would be no, and the reason being is if you look at the current proposed layout and the plat proposed, there would not be an opportunity to do such. It's platted in 12 duplex lots, which would not afford the opportunity to change that, especially once the duplexes are built upon the lots themselves.
Okay. I think you hit a major point, Mr. Osborne, when you said there's a level of distrust here. So if this goes forward, this would be a great opportunity for Central States to prove that they could be good neighbors and a positive addition, assuming this goes through. I'd like to know, again, what the plan is for monitoring those people who rent these units.
Well,
To make sure that they're kept up and the neighborhood is indeed enhanced by what's being added there.
you have two components associated with that. Component one, I'll address the maintenance. And as we discussed at the Planning Commission meeting, it's a common maintenance. The property manager will maintain the grounds. They'll get mowed at the same time continuously throughout, so you don't have one lot looking different than the other lot. The landscaping throughout it, again, will be maintained in the same manner as the mowing. All exterior upkeep will be handled by the management company. And as part of the program that this project is associated with, the tenants have to go through a very significant vetting process that is outlined by the state and administered through the management company itself, inclusive of state inspections on an annualized basis. So with that, not only is it required to maintain the property in a condition that meets the standards of the state of Kansas, the residents also have to meet certain criteria that is outlined by the state of Kansas. And if they don't or they violate those, they're automatically or forced to leave the property itself and not continue to be rented. So I think you have a safeguard for the residents that will be there, more so than you would in any privately owned, even though this is a private endeavor, but individually owned development. And you have the maintenance element in place that you're providing common maintenance to the entire 24 units as a whole, so they'll be kept up in an appropriate manner and on a regular basis. I don't know if that answers the questions you're looking for.
Yeah, I think that addresses some of the concerns that I had in mind. And if I took this down correctly, Universal Management Company will be the entity who's overseeing what? The
Both
or the
both the
No, you tell
leasing,
me, I'm sorry.
both the leasing and the property management, inclusive of the maintenance, yes.
Okay. Does that company currently manage any other similar properties in KCK, Wyandotte County?
I can't speak directly for Kansas City, Kansas, but I can speak for the Kansas City area, and I'm being told yes. And we did submit to staff a package outlining not only their representatives that would be working with us on this project, but some history and other information, background, and other projects that they're associated with in the metropolitan area.
Okay. Also, there were some concerns raised by some of the residents that you heard speak tonight and others about the tax situation. I believe there is concern that if this project goes forward, there will be tax breaks given there that the current residents are not entitled to. Is there someone, staff, mayor, that could address that situation, or the applicant, that they could address it?
Yes, Mr. Bach will answer that question.
Yeah, Commissioner, regarding the tax status, so while a church has a tax exemption status, properties are taxed at their use. So while they may be under the ownership of the church, they'll be taxed as private, individual, residential units, and they will pay normal taxes.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. These are all the questions that I had now. Like I said, if this goes forward, this will certainly be an opportunity for the owners to prove that they can be good neighbors with the current residents there. I don't have any other questions, Mr. Mayor, at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bynum?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. We're going from R1 to R2, two-family housing. You had commented that you could basically build single-family housing there right now.
That is correct.
And have you considered that?
We have, and I think I addressed that as part of my presentation, in that this is set aside as a 55-plus community.
Correct.
And I have been associated with at least 50 to 100 55-plus communities, and every one of them is attached housing. Most of the residents that populate the facilities associated with that feel more comfortable living in an attached housing element.
Okay.
And that's why we've slated it as attached housing for
And I
this.
think the two that I'm thinking of that would be similar in the 83rd Street area of Wyandotte County are also attached. So I do understand. Now, I would like staff to confirm the street lighting requirement. That
Commissioner,
is in fact
yes, this is
required.
definitely a part of it. We realized there was an issue in a development that occurred a number of years ago, but that is definitely
Okay.
part of this plan.
Thank you. And I do know older adult housing is very much needed in Wyandotte County. We simply do not have enough. So it tends to be attractive to me because of the 55-plus element that you're bringing forward. On the map that's not showing here on our big screen, but the parcel where you're planning to develop, there's a very large parcel directly west of it after that youth center building. Is that also a parcel held by the church?
Are you referring to east of it? We're developing
East,
everything.
east.
And that's what I thought you meant. And yes, it is. That entire parcel from 33rd to 36th is owned by the church.
And what are the plans for that parcel?
I can't speak directly to that. We're only rezoning what would be the western half of the larger parcel. And even though they have us show the entire ownership because that has not been subdivided yet, which is part of the preliminary plat that we had approved at the Planning Commission before. So by doing that subdivision of our half, that leaves the balance over. Now, one of the issues that did get brought up at the Planning Commission, and I will address this, is that during some of the conferences and events that are hosted both through the church and through the public at the community center, there had been a question of parking and concern. And one of the requirements we have as part of our submission plan is, I believe it's prior to the filing of our plat, we have to submit a plan showing how the utilization of that current community center can be facilitized with parking. And so they do obviously own the property to the north, on the north side of Garfield. And so what we're going to come forward with prior to filing of the plat is a parking arrangement for the utilization of the community center. Whether or not that property to the east of the current community center, the large flat land, is converted into additional parking or other things, I can't answer today. That's part of what we're going to be doing a study on prior to filing the plat. But that was one of the concerns the neighbors had at the Planning Commission meeting was, while that statement has nothing to do with the rezoning matter in front of you, it does deal with the ownership and they're being good neighbors. So one of the things we've agreed to is that prior to allowing us to file the plat, we will have shown how parking will be handled for events and occurrences at the community center.
Okay. So just one last question.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
I apologize if you've answered it, but I was having some technical difficulties earlier.
That's what I'm here for.
So we need to know and be assured of who within the local church environment would be the point of contact for any neighbor or staff or elected official concerns. We would want to make sure that we have got a go-to person who is authorized to take care of whatever issues might arise.
And generally, that would be the management company that is being hired by the development team itself. Typically, as with any multifamily housing development that one may have, you have a management group that manages that, and they take care of the issues. Now, I understand your point. If something's not getting done through the management company, what's the next level you go to? And I will let some representatives from Central States address that.
Thank
then.
you.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to you. My name is Roger Bernard, and I'm the president of Central States Conference. My other two officers are here as well, Elder Christian Josiah, who's the vice president. Just stand for a moment. And Elder Tanya Anderson, who is our vice president for finance. We will be the individuals, if the community had any concerns or what have you, they could always address us. Our office is right there on the property. They can feel free at any time to come and talk with us.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Murguia? Yes, thank you. Commissioner Murguia?
Thanks, Mayor. I just had a question. The ultimate owner of this affordable 55 and older property is whom?
It is the Central States Conference of the Seventh-day Adventists. They are the landowner, and they are the ultimate owner of the facility itself.
Is the Central State Conference, of all the other things he said, is that a not-for-profit? Okay, I'm just confirming, it's a not-for-profit.
Yes, ma'am.
And they will be actively involved with the ongoing day-to-day operations of this property?
Well, that, in general, the landowner and/or the overall development team has hired, and in this instance did hire, the Universal Management Company, and they do the day-to-day active management, both from a maintenance standpoint, a leasing standpoint, and when I say maintenance, again, it's not just yard maintenance, but building maintenance, other things of that nature. Now, who ultimately employs them? The development team, which is the primary owner, which is Central States.
Okay, Central States is located, where is their office located?
I believe they've indicated that, well, I'll let them speak for that.
We're located right there, 3301 Parallel Parkway.
Okay, and Universal Management is located where?
I don't have their address. I know we had submitted it to staff. Where?
14 something 7th Street, Kansas City, Kansas.
Okay, thank you
Sorry
very
about
much.
that coming from the crowd, but
It's all right, thanks.
you're welcome.
Right. If there are any, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please. I'm sorry, who was the second? I have a motion.
Is that for both items or separately?
I thought we were considering both of them at the same, correct?
That'd be-
For both items, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Townsend. Thank you.
Yeah.
Roll call, please.
Roll call, Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
Regia.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. Markley.
Aye.
The vote is 7-0.
Thank you very much for your time. Next is Special Use Permit SP 2019-84, Abdul Mazid requesting a renewal for a used car dealership at 1010 Miriam Lane. The Planning Commission voted 6-1 for denial. The applicant has requested to hold this item, however, since the public hearing was noticed for this evening, we will proceed with public hearing. I'd ask staff to make some opening comments. I will say if there is anyone here regarding this item, if it is held over, the discussion, the public hearing will be held over again until the next meeting. Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners and Mayor. This petition was recommended for denial by the Planning Commission. Staff had recommended an approval for 6 months to give them a stipulation that they build a sidewalk within that 6 month. The commission did decide to vote for denial. In order to overturn that recommendation, we must have a vote of 8 commissioners.
All right, and we do not have 8, so we cannot take that action. So I'd ask the applicant to come forward to make comments. All right, he's not here. I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone present who would like to speak in favor of this? Seeing none, I'd ask if there anyone who'd like to speak in opposition. Again, seeing none. We'll close the public hearing. Will the petitioner, nope, petitioner's not here. Any members of the commission have any comments or questions on this item?
So, I don't, Mayor, but I have a motion. I'd move for approval as the Planning Commission has recommended.
You're moving for approval as approval of the denial.
That's correct.
Right.
Oh, not this.
So we have a motion. We have a second.
Second the denial.
We always mess up on this, Mayor.
Yes.
That's why.
So we vote to approve the denial, the recommendation of the commission. We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Roll call, Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
Regia,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kane,
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Next is special use permit SP 2019-88, Jennifer Priest with Showalter Law Firm for a short-term rental Airbnb at 423 Ann. Planning Commission voted 5-2 to recommend approval for 1 year. I'd ask staff to make some opening comments.
Thank you. Staff agrees with Planning Commission, recommend for approval.
Thank you. I'd ask the applicant to come forward and make comments. Please
Hi,
state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Magda Born, 8121 Tomahawk Road, Prairie Village, Kansas, and I'm here representing Mr. Showalter in two of his properties on N Street and 5th Street, and he's applying for 1 year only for permission to run bed and breakfast. Bed and breakfast, yeah.
A bed and breakfast
An
or
Airbnb, I guess, Airbnb.
Airbnb. Okay. All right. All right. Thank you. Is there anyone present who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Please come forward, state your name and city of residency.
Hello, Justine Underwood Jones, Kansas City, Kansas. I just wanted to say, so I am the president of the Strawberry Hill Neighborhood Association. However, I'm here in my personal capacity as the next door neighbor to the Ann property. Normally, I wouldn't be in favor of an out-of-state landlord owning Airbnbs in Strawberry Hill, but in this case, because he renovated the properties prior to applying for special use permits, and because it's, according to him, maybe going to be around 8 months before he lists the properties for sale, and he's not interested in having a lease of a very short term for a renter and then trying to sell the property while it's occupied, because there's mitigating circumstances. I personally would support approval of both of these on the condition that it is temporary. And I believe the neighbors I've spoken with are of the same mind. If it's temporary, then that's okay, as long as we're keeping an eye on it and making sure that they're not just saying it's temporary to get their foot in the door, that sort of thing. So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Anyone else present like to speak in favor? Seeing none, anyone like to speak in opposition? All right, and we'll close the public hearing. Any comments or questions from the commission?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
Regia,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kane, Markley.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Next is special use permit SP 2019-89. Again, Jennifer Priest with Showalter Law Firm for a short-term rental Airbnb at 709 North 5th Street. Planning Commission voted 6-1 to recommend approval for 1 year. Staff, for comments?
Staff agrees with Planning Commission, recommendation for approval.
Thank you. And ask the applicant to come forward. Please state your name and city of residency.
Magda Born, 8121 Tomahawk Road, Prairie Village, Kansas, and I'm representing Mr. Showalter to apply for Airbnb for 1 year only.
Thank you. Anyone in favor would like to speak?
Justine Underwood Jones, Kansas City, Kansas. Same thing as last time.
Thank you. Anyone in opposition? Seeing none, I close the public hearing.
Move for approval.
We got a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
Regia,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kane, Markley.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. That concludes the planning and zoning portion of tonight's meeting. We'll now move to the regular portion of our agenda. Does any member of the commission or anyone in attendance tonight wish to set aside any item on the regular consent agenda? If an item is not set aside now, all items on the regular consent agenda will be voted on by one vote. Commissioner Bynum.
I just want to clarify that by regular consent agenda, you do not mean Land Bank Board of Trustees consent agenda.
That's correct.
That would be separate.
That's separate.
So thank you. I don't have anything to pull off this agenda.
Move for approval.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
Regia,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kane, Markley.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
All right, we now have two items under the administrator's agenda. Mr. Bach, present the first item.
Thank you, Mayor. First item on the agenda is a memorandum of understanding with our American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, otherwise known as ASME. This represents a group of employees that are scattered across various departments within the unified government. It is for contract year 2018 through 2019. I will say the terms of this are in accordance with the terms discussed with the commission during executive session, and I would recommend for approval.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, roll call.
Roll call, Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
Regia,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kane,
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Item number 2, Mr. Bach.
Thank you. This item is an assignment and assumption between SVV 1 and Premier Automotive at the Legends. It is done in accordance with some others that we've seen similar to this, with the transfer of property with from Schlitterbahn no longer being in ownership of these to go to those agencies or companies that are operating on those departments, so they have full ownership and they are assuming the terms of our agreement as they move through this. I would recommend for approval.
Any comments or questions from the commission? All right, seeing none, I entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
We have a motion
Second?
and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
Regia,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kane,
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. That concludes the regular portion of our meeting. We are adjourned in that capacity. We're now called back to order as the Land Bank Board of Trustees. Does any member of the commission or anyone in attendance tonight wish to set aside any item on the Land Bank consent agenda? If an item is not set aside, all items on the consent agenda will be voted on by one vote. If you have any items you'd like set aside, please step forward. Yes? Please come forward and thank you.
Good evening. My name is Elnora Tellis Jefferson, and I'd like to set aside item number 1, Land Bank business policy changes, please.
Thank you. Commissioner Bynum.
That was the same item I would ask.
Thank you. All right. Entertain a motion to approve the rest.
So move.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
Regia,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kane,
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. That takes us to the set-aside item, item number 1, Land Bank policy changes. I'd recognize Land Bank Manager Chris Slaughter, who will provide a brief presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Do the presentation tonight for the policy changes. The purpose, as we all know, of the land bank is to take problem properties, distressed properties, and get them back to productive use. What we're going to highlight tonight with the policy changes is, number 1, to become even a more strategic partner with our local governments. We want the land bank to become a pro-development asset, and we want to also be more streamlined and transparent. First thing that we're going to highlight is holds. And as you've known in the past, holds were areas of land that someone would come in and ask to be held for them until their project got off the ground. We're going to do away with that. In a minute, we'll talk about an option for them, which is an option agreement. So the option agreement would give someone an opportunity that wants to come in and develop, whether it's single family or a large-scale development, to put a non-refundable fee down and have control of the property for a year. This is very instrumental with developments, whether it's large or small. They can take this to their lender. They can show their partners that they have control of the property. Sales, we're going to ask that the sales turn around and really go to a non-buildable stage. There's still options for people in the community to use the property that we'll get to, but really what we want to do is, again, be pro-development, pro-strategic. And we will have an agreement for them for any kind of development. Again, lease, which you guys have already approved. One of the things we did add is the language about giving them 90 days notice. If we did have some other development that came in, that would give them plenty of time to prepare anything that they're already using the property for. Yard extensions, the biggest change in this is if you want a yard extension, you have to be the owner and the resident of the house next to it. So landlords that want to come in and get property, we will no longer entertain those. There's still an option to lease that property. This slide here is our new definition of non-buildable. So anything under 2,000 square feet or basically under 20 feet of frontage, anything in a floodplain, anything landlocked, right-of-way property, undermined property, or anything with just truly severe topography. Community gardens, we're really excited about this. We would like to see community gardens, and we're talking the larger scale gardens here, work with our livable neighborhoods and the neighborhood groups. We'd like to see an associated with one of the larger garden groups out throughout the metropolitan area. And we'd also just ask for some assistance from staff to turn around and find what's the best location for those neighborhoods to have those gardens. So again, we're trying to improve the flow and clarity of the process. We have clarified the role of the advisory board. We've clarified some of the recommendation processes. And another thing is any property that's transferred into the land bank, we will wait one meeting cycle before we ask to transfer that out. And that is our request for tonight on the policy changes.
Thank you. I'm going to ask if you would like to speak to this, Elnora. I know you asked to set it aside.
Good evening, Mayor Alvey, UG Board of Trustees, County Administrator Doug Bach, UG staff, and those in the audience. Before I start, I want to say a thank you to Chris. It does a lot of hard work to make this, it's a very complicated process, very involved to try to make it easy and understandable, so thank you, Chris. I am the chair of the Northeast MBR HNMA, and I come to you tonight to request two changes to the proposed land bank policy. The first request is to include HNMA, which is named as the implementer of the Northeast Area Master Plan, as a bona fide member of the team that develops land bank policy and procedures. The second request is to eliminate the two-step approval process, which is on page 5 of the policy, of the land bank applications in favor of a one-step approval process that causes the staff advisory team and the land bank advisory board to meet as one. Approving my request provides synergy, elevates the collective knowledge level of all, establishes a climate for process innovation, and reduces the time and labor costs. It also provides a more analytical power should issues and circumstances require. Finally, redos are expensive, and you will have them in a two-step process. The two requests comport with the Commissioner's 5-year strategic plan, specifically Goal 5, increase employee innovation and problem solving, and Goal 6, increase community cohesion. The approval of the 2018 Northeast Master Plan signaled for the first time that an official master plan was created by Northeast area citizens. Faith and hope in the government process rose, and even today, citizens talk about the master plan with great anticipation. Nearly a year after the approval of the master plan, tonight's proposed land bank policy and procedures come before you for approval. However, in contrast to the master plan, the land bank policy is void of current citizen input. Because the majority of land bank and vacant properties are located in the master plan area, there is a nexus between the land bank policy and procedures and the master plan's land use plan.
Ma'am, you have 1 minute.
Currently, using the current zoning rewrite as an example, you formed a steering committee for the purposes of data gathering and validation. Members bring a wide variety of expertise, interest, and concerns to the causes of ensuring that the rewrite will be relevant, functional, easy to use, and comprehensive. Equitable development is an essential ingredient to restoring health equity, strategic goal number 3, and zoning can be an active player in this process. While it may be impractical and unnecessary to engage citizens over many months in monthly meetings to draft updates to the land bank policy and procedures, the exclusion of any meaningful engagement could be an unfortunate oversight. By providing additional information and insight to the customer-facing NBR, it becomes more adept at serving the respective commissioners' constituencies with gained efficiencies in customer service, reduced UG overhead, and perhaps even more assures that the policy and procedures enacted do not inadvertently cause harm.
That's 3 minutes.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you very much. Nothing in either of my requests negatively impacts the purpose of the Wyandotte County Land Bank to return tax delinquent and distressed properties to productive use that benefits the community, the guiding principles on pages 2 and 3, or the neighborhood land use planning conformance on page 2. However, granting my request will have positive impacts. It'll raise the knowledge of the NBR in development and other areas. It'll increase the efficiency with which the service area commissioners' constituencies are served, and it'll reduce UZ overhead, and finally help to ensure the creation of a unified and consistent approach to the disposal of real properties owned by the land bank. Again, my name is Elnora Jefferson, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. So I'm wondering, Mr. Slaughter, if this is possible for us to take this into consideration. I mean, what Ms. Jefferson is proposing, I would certainly need more time to look it over, even to know what position I would take on it. I'm not opposed, but I don't understand it enough to how this would work. And I think what I would like to see is if those two proposals actually imagine how this would play out and whether it would be conducive to the process.
Well, I think the way the policy's been presented to you tonight and is written is, HNMA and all the other MBRs are still part of the process. We have created the staff team. We think that's very vital. But we also will have more and complete input from the advisory boards. And the plan is all comments, all information necessary will be presented to this board for consideration and approval. I think we have that covered. I think it's been there. And we're just hoping that these changes in this policy strengthen that. And yes, we are always welcoming any input from the advisory board. I think we feel that the policy is already set for those recommendations.
Okay. So my concern in this would be that Mrs. Jefferson does not seem convinced that it's been covered. I think that'd be correct. And so I would rather that we hold this over for nope, I'm sorry, what's the problem here?
Can you please recognize Wendy Green from UG Legal to explain one of our issues and why it was addressed the way it was in the policy?
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry, thank you, good evening. I'd like to address the last point she made about the staff advisory team and the land bank board meeting, joining together as one, and unfortunately, the statutes simply don't allow for that. The statutes are very clear as to what makeup the land bank advisory board has to be, and that does not include staff. So unfortunately, we can't meet that accommodation.
Thank you, good clarification. All right, thank you.
Oh, and then the other reason that we're talking about as far as making up the policy, we have to be very careful to be inclusive and not exclusive. So a lot goes into that consideration as well. We want to make sure that we're not violating maybe Title VII issues. So our thought process into what goes behind that was also very thought out, and we tried to follow along the rules of the law like we're supposed to.
Okay, would you go and explain what is Type 7?
Title VII would
Title
be,
VII.
Title VII is just any type of discrimination based off of gender, based off of religion, based off of any type of discrimination whatsoever. So you can't exclude. So we just want to make sure that we follow along and try to keep this as inclusive as we possibly can. But I think Melissa's getting ready to address that even more.
So the other issues with fair housing, also another federal delegation down to the states to execute in local governments. So again, having the neighborhoods participate is very important, but how they participate, this is just a very slippery slope that, and happy to, if you want to set it aside, that does domino to a whole series of issues after this in the weeks and months to come. What I would suggest is if you did consider passing this tonight, we can come back. We already had some other recommendations from Commissioner Brian McKiernan to address some other things that he wanted to look at, and we had already had talked to him about sitting down with not only Lara, but Rachel Jefferson, because she had been at the previous meeting, to work through these things. And I think if we could do that, but the need to get the update done is obviously important because of several pending requests before this body that have been held off for a number of months. So with what we've put together, I think it's a good step in the right direction. I think some clarification around what Ms. Jefferson has brought forward tonight is important. And those meetings we're going to progress based on the standing committee's recommendations to the governing body.
With the commitment to continue to look at other items that might need to be added.
Yes, which includes the issues with not only fair housing, but also Title VII.
Thank you. Commissioner Bynum?
Thank you. So a couple of comments. Ms. Jefferson noted that the majority of land bank properties currently are in districts 1 and 4. And that comprises 2 of the 4 districts in the at-large district that I serve. So that is of importance to me and interest to me, and I can understand the desire for a voice when districts 1 and 4 are basically the boundaries of Historic Northeast Midtown Association. So I understand that. I have a number of items myself in the policy, which I'm sure doesn't surprise anyone. So 2 of my 4 districts have the majority of the land bank property, and yet I do not sit as a serving member of the standing committee that meets on this item or votes on these changes. And so when the committee met last, and I was trying to live stream it because I wasn't able to be there in person. And so I appreciated Commissioner McKiernan saying he still believes changes are in the works and need to be made, and I would echo that because I've got a whole document full of them in terms of nothing overly dramatic, but just questions about certain words and also a general concern that we do not lose the neighborhood level voice within the Land Bank Advisory Board. And I know watching it live stream, Rachel Jefferson had made a comment that night about changing a shall to a may. And those tiny little words mean big different things. And so I see on page 5, Land Bank Advisory Board may advise the Board of Trustees, and I would also agree that should go back to being the word shall. But I have lots of other questions and comments like that. So I guess I'm going to make a motion that we approve the policy in its current form, knowing that at the standing committee level, that chair did request the ability to basically see and utilize this as a living document that will change. And I guess I would just, for the record, within my motion, make the motion to approve and note that it is a living policy document that we all agree upon approving this will change. And then I would ask if the appropriate way for me to participate in that is to attend that standing committee meeting, or what is the best way for me to participate in the crafting of the policy from here out. But first, I did make a motion.
Second.
Commissioner Johnson, do you have comments?
Third.
Okay.
Sorry, brother.
We have a motion and a second. Commissioner Burrows?
Thank you, Mayor. Will that be, you said the living document will, it will be a may, a shall, or a will?
In that case, will.
Just want a clarification.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Bynum.
Aye.
Mayor?
Yes, Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. I did have a comment. As a member of that standing committee, not the very last meeting, but the time before that, when these changes were first put on the table, I know quite a bit of discussion and explanation from Mr. Slaughter and council was had about the role of advisory and all that. But at the heart of it, I did believe that there was no chance of loss of the voice of the community. But I think it was made clear, and Councilor Green, I think, addressed this issue a few minutes ago about the role of advisory. So I think all of our ordinances are living documents. I don't know that that has to be said, because as the needs of the community change or concerns arise, we're always free to go back and look at those and parse over them again if we need to. So I would support the passage of this. Whether it will or won't change depends on how we look at it later, but all our documents are living documents. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Let's continue with the roll call.
Okay, Bynum's already voted aye, so
Aye.
we'll go with Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend,
Commissioner Townsend, how do you vote?
Aye.
Regia.
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Kane. Markley.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. That concludes our meeting for the evening.
Gail Townsend.
Is now